Hi friends, I'm here with another tutorial. Today we're taking on Scrivener for Novelists. I did promise to also cover how I use Scrivener for poetry, but the novel part of this video ended up taking a lot longer than I anticipated, so I'm gonna have to cover the poetry in a different video, sometime in the next few weeks or months, hopefully. This is what Scrivener looks like when you start a new project. There's a lot of preloaded templates, but I find those super overwhelming and tend to like to start with a blank page and build my own folders. So that's what I'll be doing today. The one downside to doing it this way is that you won't be able to use the preloaded character and setting sheets. But those are easy enough to copy over, and I'll show you how I do that once we get to those folders. First, I start by changing draft to manuscript. So I click this and type in manuscript instead. In general, I tend to write 3-part books because I follow the 3-act structure. So I'm gonna populate this with 3 folders to represent those different acts. And then within those acts, I'm gonna put 3 chapters in each act to denote different chapters. And I'm just doing that to illustrate it right now. I don't actually only have 3 chapters per act, obviously. So I have my acts, and I have some chapters within one act. Right now it's showing you the corkboard view. After I've done this, I add 2 folders. One is disordered scenes. As the name implies, these are scenes written out of order. Usually scenes that involve character development but don't have as much to do with plot, and so I don't yet know where they live. And then the other folder I add is a deleted scenes folder. The deleted scenes folder isn't going to live in the manuscript itself, but it's going to be right after the manuscript for ease of access. So I'm just gonna pull them out. So there you have everything you're gonna have before the research folder. And then I create these documents and folders in the research folder. I start with a metadata file. That's where I keep all the overarching details of the manuscript, which can be really helpful when I'm in the thick of it. This is also where I keep the pitch I'll be sending to my agent, as well as a brief summary that reads like a query letter, just so I can easily find it as I'm writing. And I like to make this I have a general research folder within the research folder itself. This is where I keep research notes, like for example, notes on road trips for my road trip novel. I like making this a magnifying glass. Earlier drafts of scenes. This is where I put old drafts of scenes that I've edited extensively, just in case I find myself wanting to revert to an earlier draft. But this is really only when they've been edited extensively. I'll show you what I do when I'm usually editing. My next folder is an outlines folder. I'm not going to get into plotting in this video. I'd be happy to do that in a future video if there's any interest. But in general, I keep these documents within the outlines folder. Brain dump, subplot, short outline, and long outline. And I like the outline icon for this. Then I add a scene cards folder where I can view all my scene cards. And I will also populate this with the different acts, so I can keep them separated by act. And I do like changing these icons to books instead. Act 1 is yellow, Act 2 is green, and Act 3 is red. Just because my endings tend to be darker, but obviously your mileage may vary. And then I like reflecting that here too, just to keep things consistent. So we have our scene cards here. And I changed this to also be an outline. After the scene cards folder, I make a folder for characters. and then a folder for settings. Then I have a notes folder. Within notes, I keep an early materials folder. This is where I keep any early material that might be useful to reference. For example, a lot of my novels started as short stories, and those stories don't really show up anymore in the draft, but it's useful to have them around so I can use them to reference specific details about plot or character. I also keep an ideas folder in here. In ideas, I keep 3 different documents. The first is random ideas. The second is family stories, because a lot of my ideas, especially in my verse novel, have come from stories that my parents have told me about their lives. And then an earlier novels document, which is so useful when I'm writing sequels or even stories that occur in the same timeline, but from other points of view. For example, in my first novel, I have a few poems that feature a younger sister, and my second novel is from the younger sister's perspective. So I wanted to have a place to track ideas for poems from the first novel that I could rewrite in the second novel to capture that new perspective. Other things that I keep in notes, the plotting notes folder. This is where I keep any writing reference sheets about plotting that I use as I write or plot. It's also where I keep plotting worksheets and generally any other notes I have or exercises I did while I was plotting. After plotting notes, I add a few more documents within the notes section. The first of these is recurring motifs. And that's where I brainstorm and keep track of any recurring motifs in the novel. And then I have timeline, which is where I jot down any necessary notes about timeline, but this isn't where I actually track the timeline. I do that in the outline view, and I'll show you that later. And then soundtrack. And finally, a random notes section. And I do change these icons to reflect what they are a little better. I think I stole the idea from Abbie, but I will be sure to link her in the description. So that's the full notes folder. After that, I make a templates folder, which is where I keep all my templates. Namely, that's a character sketch. And I'm just copying and pasting this from the Scrivener character sketch template. And a setting sketch. And you can find these within the other document templates in Scrivener. In order for Scrivener to recognize this as a template, you do have to go into the settings and make this your template folder. So select templates, go to project settings, and then special folders. And where it says templates folder, select templates down here. Then I changed the default subdocument for the characters and settings folders. So this will be character sketch. It's already selected because I already did that. And then settings, setting sketch. And that way, whenever I insert a new subdocument by clicking plus while I have this folder selected, it'll be a character sketch. And whenever I select it here, it'll be a setting sketch, which is very useful. I love the templates folder. I use it for all kinds of things. Like, for example, I also have a template for scene cards, which is really useful when I'm looking at scene cards. Now that I've set up my folders, I'm going to show you how I set things up in the outline view. I am so excited to show you this part because it's one of the coolest things about Scrivener, and it really sets it apart from all the other text editing softwares I've tried, at least. To access the outline view, click on Manuscript, and then this right here will give you the outline view. You'll see an outline of your entire draft. Probably all you'll see right now is title and synopsis, label, status, and section type. But I like to keep track of a few more things here. I keep the label column, but I changed the labels to reflect beats in the plot. I got that idea from Sofiya Pasternack, who makes great Scrivener tutorials and has probably introduced me to everything I know about Scrivener. I highly recommend you check her out. I'll be sure to leave a link to her channel. I'm going to be using Sofiya's 7-beat plot structure here. I'm going to keep the label column, but I'm going to change the labels to reflect the 7 beats. The way to do that is to go here and just change what the colors represent. And then add a color for the climax. I like making this a little bit brighter. Now I can select whatever beat each scene falls into. You can also set it up to show the label in the binder here. The way to do that is to go to View and then use Label Color and show as background color in binder. And now see how chapter 1 has a red tint to it. I also keep the status column, but I change it to include other options than what's given here. I make to do my default. I keep in progress. I keep first draft. I keep revised draft. But then I add right here a second draft / also read and a third draft beta read. And then line edited. And then I keep final draft and done. So lots of options, which honestly is probably overkill, but this is my ideal, and it makes it really easy to see at a glance where I am with each scene. I do not keep section type, so I will get rid of that. After status, I add a checkbox. And the way to do that is you go here and click the plus sign, change it to checkbox. Give it a title. This indicates whether or not the scene has been merged yet. This is very particular to my writing process. I do often write scenes out of order, which means I have to merge them when I'm putting the draft together. What that means is usually just rewriting the beginning and ending of the scene and then making sure there's no issues in continuity. So once I've completed that process, I can just check this box off like that. After the merged column, I like adding the keywords column, which is up here. And the way to edit the keywords is to go over here in the inspector and look at the metadata, and you can just add the keywords here. With keywords, I like tracking the time of day. And that's just to make sure I have a balance of morning, afternoon, evening, and night scenes. That just helps me to improve pacing and hopefully make the reading experience a little more enjoyable because it's more varied. So this is how I set up those keywords. And then in the document, to add the keywords to the list, I go here and I can just say add keyword, time of day, morning for chapter 1. And you can use multiple keywords at the same time. So say that chapter 1 also has an afternoon scene. That's how you would add 2 of them. Next to keywords, I add a location column and a timeline column. Location is just text. Timeline is a date. And you can choose the format here. I tend to like to have a full date. I like this blue. And then I have to add it to the view. These 2 columns were so helpful while I was working on my road trip novel because they allowed me to see at a glance how many scenes took place in each state along the route, and also helped with questions of mileage and logic related to mileage, you know, whether it made logical sense for my characters to be where they were during a particular scene. So for example, let's just put Virginia here, And I don't remember the particular date, but to illustrate, let me just put May 1st, 1993. And then finally, I like adding a total words column so that I can make sure the parts, chapters, and scenes make sense in terms of length, which can be useful in terms of improving pacing and also moving scenes around, which I haven't shown you how to do yet, but basically, here, let me add some scenes here. Okay, so say that these are all scenes, and say that I want to put this scene in chapter 2. I can just easily drag and drop it, but it should retain all the metadata for it. So say that this scene that takes place at night, I want to move it to chapter 3. So it's really easy to just like move things around and retain the keywords and the location and timeline so that you have a sense of where you are at all times. It's so nice to be able to see it all in this outline view and edit it accordingly. I use this column to not only track whether the scene itself has been merged into the document, but also if I change details over here, like location and timeline, I uncheck this and go back to edit the scene to account for these changes, and then I recheck it once I've finished. Now that I've shown you how I set up my outline view, I'm going to show you some tips and tricks for the drafting view. So this is the Scrivenings view. First and foremost, the split screen view is an absolute game changer. I used this so much in college for my articles and school papers. It allows you to open and view 2 documents simultaneously. So say that you have this scene, which we can call scene 1, open, and you want to also view metadata at the same time. Just click this button and then open metadata in the other view. You can also, and I was so excited to learn this, view your outline at the same time as your draft. So I have scene 1 and metadata open here, but if I click this and then click manuscript, it takes me to outline view, and I can see the outline at the same time as the draft. My next tip, and this is one I wish I'd known when I was a beginner, but I only recently started using it regularly, is the snapshots feature. So what I used to do is I would write a draft and then I would duplicate it to make edits. And then I would just trash the original version. But with the snapshots feature, you can take a photo of your draft as you edit. The way to access the snapshots feature is to click this camera icon in the inspector, and then before you start editing, to take a snapshot by clicking this plus sign. I think you can literally take an unlimited number of photos, and then you can view and restore any of them if the need arises. And that has made editing poems so much easier. I also love that you can name each version. And you can roll back to any draft. And finally, this is another new thing that I wish I'd known about sooner because it would have been really helpful while I was working on my thesis. You can add bookmarks to any scene or folder to track both internal and external documents. For example, you can use it to keep track of plot notes internally, and it allows you to view 3 things at once instead of just 2 like you get with the split screen. The way to access the bookmarks is to go here and this bookmark icon, and then add a bookmark by going here. And this gives you an outline of your entire binder. And so like say that you want to keep a character sketch in mind, it'll appear right here. So now you can view your character sketch and your outline while you're editing in this draft. You can also link any relevant research links and pull them up right here in Scrivener. So just for example, say I want to be able to pull up a particular tweet for reference while I'm writing this scene. I can just click here, add external bookmark, and now it shows me this tweet while I'm drafting. I hope that was helpful, but let me know if you have any questions. I will post the poetry version very soon. Thanks for watching and see you next week.